January 11, 1944. The winter sky over northern Germany was a relentless expanse of grey, low and brooding, with the kind of cold that seeped into every corner of a pilot's aircraft, chilling bones and minds alike. Below, the fields of Schutzleben lay quiet, seemingly untouched, yet on this day they would witness the clash of courage and steel that would echo across the skies of World War II. In the midst of this frozen theater, Lieutenant Colonel James H. Howard, a pilot of the United States Army Air Forces, prepared to embark on a mission that would test the limits of human endurance, skill, and valor. Howard's journey to that fateful morning was neither simple nor predestined. Born in 1913 in Canton, Ohio, he had demonstrated from an early age a combination of intelligence, curiosity, and a penchant for precision. He studied at Case Western Reserve University, where his aptitude for analytical thinking and mechanical understanding began to manifest, and eventually earned his commission in the Army Air Corps. By 1944, Howard had already proven himself a capable pilot, yet nothing in his prior experience could have fully prepared him for the extraordinary demands he would face on that winter day over Schutzleben. The mission itself seemed, on paper, straightforward: escort a group of B-17 flying fortresses returning from a bombing raid deep into Germany. The strategic importance of these bombers was immense. They carried payloads intended to cripple Nazi industrial capacity, targeting factories, railways, and oil refineries critical to the German war machine. Protecting these aircraft was essential, for the loss of even a handful could mean the failure of the operation and the death of dozens of young airmen whose lives hung in delicate balance above hostile territory. Howard piloted his P-51 Mustang, an aircraft that had earned its reputation as one of the most effective and reliable fighters in the Allied arsenal. Sleek, fast, and remarkably maneuverable, the Mustang combined cutting-edge aerodynamics with formidable firepower. Yet, in the vast expanse of winter skies, even the most advanced aircraft could be rendered vulnerable by numbers, skill, and the chaos of battle. Howard knew this. Every mission carried risk, and every decision he made could result in life or death for himself and the men he was sworn to protect. As the formation approached Schutzleben, German fighters, Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf Fw-190s, descended from above, dark silhouettes against the pale morning light. The Germans were experienced, cunning, and desperate to defend their homeland. They attacked in waves, coordinating their efforts to overwhelm the bomber formation, a tactic honed over years of brutal air combat. For the young bomber crews, the sky had become a place of mortal peril, and for Howard, the role of protector was immediate, absolute, and unforgiving. Howard's initial response was decisive and precise. He positioned his Mustang between the oncoming enemy fighters and the bombers, creating a shield of speed, firepower, and tactical acumen. With his .50 caliber machine guns, he began to engage the attackers, carefully calculating deflection angles, lead, and timing to maximize effect. Each maneuver was executed with a clarity born of training and instinct, the result of countless hours in the cockpit under stress, simulating situations that could never fully replicate the chaos of real combat. The engagement escalated rapidly. Enemy fighters came from all directions, head-on dives, rolling attacks, and coordinated runs designed to test the reflexes and nerve of even the most skilled pilot. Howard's attention became a finely tuned focus, every muscle, every thought dedicated to survival, defense, and offensive precision. He tracked multiple targets simultaneously, adjusted for wind, speed, and altitude, and maintained constant situational awareness of the bombers he was sworn to protect. This was no ordinary dogfight. It was a prolonged struggle for dominance in a deadly three-dimensional chess game played at hundreds of miles per hour. During the engagement, Howard's courage was tested in extraordinary ways. At one point, his guns jammed, an almost fatal equipment failure in the midst of relentless attack. Yet, rather than retreating or abandoning the bombers, he relied on the sheer intimidation of his presence and the positioning of his aircraft to deter enemy fighters. His maneuvers alone forced opponents into defensive postures, buying precious time for the bombers below. This ability to maintain command of the skies without functional weaponry highlighted not only his skill as a pilot but the depth of his tactical understanding and the steadfastness of his resolve. Fuel constraints added another layer of urgency. The P-51, while efficient for its performance, carried limited fuel for extended sorties. Howard's gauges indicated dangerously low levels, yet he pressed on, recognizing that retreat or hesitation would leave the bombers exposed. In that critical hour, the difference between life and death for dozens of airmen depended entirely on his decisions: how to engage multiple foes, when to maneuver, when to feint, and when to risk every ounce of fuel remaining. The stakes were as high as any battle in history, measured not by territory but by human lives suspended hundreds of feet in the air. Throughout the encounter, Howard demonstrated an instinctive ability to anticipate enemy actions. He observed patterns in their attack runs, predicted intercept points, and exploited weaknesses in their formations. His timing in firing bursts from the Mustang's guns, when they were operational, was meticulous, ensuring maximum impact with minimal exposure. The combination of aggression, defense, and calculated risk created a dynamic equilibrium, a delicate balance that allowed him to repel attack after attack despite overwhelming odds. Over the course of more than an hour, Howard engaged in combat that tested the limits of human endurance. He shot down 3 enemy aircraft, a remarkable achievement in itself, particularly given the adverse conditions, the presence of multiple attackers, and the physical strain of continuous high-speed aerial maneuvering. Each successful interception was the product of split-second judgment, hand-eye coordination, and an intimate understanding of both his own aircraft and the tactics of the enemy. The accomplishments of that morning went far beyond technical proficiency. They embodied extraordinary courage under relentless, life-threatening pressure. Equally remarkable was Howard's psychological composure. Sustained aerial combat is an environment of extreme stress, where fatigue, fear, and adrenaline interact unpredictably. Pilots must maintain clarity of thought, emotional regulation, and unwavering focus despite sensory overload, disorientation, and the persistent threat of death. Howard's ability to remain calm, deliberate, and decisive over more than an hour of continuous engagement reflected not only rigorous training but an innate temperament suited to extraordinary responsibility. His decisions, precise and measured, became the lifeline for those relying on his protection. The bomber crews beneath him, aware of the danger yet often unable to see the full scope of the engagement, depended entirely on his interventions. Each maneuver, each defensive positioning, represented an invisible shield between life and destruction. The P-51 Mustang, under Howard's control, became both sword and guardian, a conduit through which courage, skill, and duty translated into tangible protection for the airmen above the frozen fields of Germany. The human element of warfare, the instinct to protect, the weight of responsibility, the drive to persevere, was manifest in every action he took that day. Howard's heroism was further amplified by the sheer numerical disadvantage. Enemy fighters outnumbered him significantly, employing both tactical coordination and brute force to overwhelm the escorting pilot. To survive, and to continue defending the bombers, required not only technical mastery of the aircraft but extraordinary situational awareness, adaptability, and anticipation. Each enemy maneuver demanded a calculated response, a decision that had to account for immediate survival and the protection of others. The complexity of this dynamic, played out at high speed in 3 dimensions, underscores the exceptional nature of his performance. During this engagement, Howard demonstrated the capacity to innovate under pressure. With jammed guns, low fuel, and enemy planes pressing from multiple angles, he adapted tactics in real time. He used energy management, altitude advantage, and psychological deterrence to influence enemy behavior, creating the illusion of strength and control even in compromised conditions. These adaptive strategies reflect a level of ingenuity and composure that distinguishes exceptional leaders and fighters, revealing the cognitive as well as physical dimensions of aerial combat heroism. The significance of Howard's actions extends beyond the immediate tactical outcomes. By defending the bomber formation, he enabled critical Allied bombing operations to continue, striking at the industrial heart of Nazi Germany. Each successful sortie contributed to weakening the enemy's capacity to wage war, disrupting production, and facilitating subsequent Allied advances. In this sense, Howard's courage had strategic as well as immediate implications. His individual heroism directly impacted the broader trajectory of the air campaign over Europe, illustrating the profound influence one person can exert in the midst of complex, high-stakes operations. Recognition of Howard's extraordinary conduct was inevitable. For his actions on January 11, 1944, he was awarded the Medal of Honor, the United States military's highest decoration for valor. The citation emphasized not merely the tactical success, but the sustained courage, exceptional skill, and unwavering devotion to duty displayed under extreme conditions. It highlighted a rare combination of heroism and professionalism, the ability to confront overwhelming danger while maintaining moral and operational clarity. Yet the full measure of Howard's achievement is perhaps best understood through the human stories of those he protected. Bomber crews who survived that mission carried forward, completing subsequent operations and contributing to the eventual Allied victory in Europe. Their lives of young men in their prime, were safeguarded by the courage of a single individual, operating under extreme stress, constrained by equipment and circumstance, yet undeterred in his commitment. In these human terms, heroism becomes tangible, the stakes vividly real, and the consequences deeply personal. The P-51 Mustang itself, often celebrated for its technical excellence, is inseparable from Howard's heroism. The aircraft represented a synthesis of engineering and strategy, a tool capable of exceptional performance when wielded by a skilled and determined pilot. Howard's understanding of the Mustang's capabilities, combined with his tactical acumen, allowed him to exploit its strengths while mitigating vulnerabilities. The synergy between man and machine is a central element of this narrative, illustrating how technical innovation and human ingenuity together shape outcomes in war. Howard's engagement near Schurzleben also exemplifies the evolving nature of aerial warfare during World War II. Escort missions had become increasingly critical as strategic bombing campaigns intensified. The airspace over Germany was fiercely contested, and the protection of bombers required not only superior flying skill but keen strategic insight, rapid decision-making, and courage under fire. Howard's performance set a standard for fighter pilots, demonstrating how individual excellence could influence mission success, sustain morale, and contribute to broader operational objectives. The winter sky over Germany on January 11, 1944, continued to press down with a pale, oppressive weight, as if the heavens themselves bore witness to the extraordinary events unfolding over Schurzleben. Lieutenant Colonel James H. Howard had already spent over an hour engaged in relentless combat, yet the battle was far from over. Enemy fighters remained a constant threat, swarming in waves, seeking to overwhelm the lone Mustang pilot who had become the de facto guardian of the returning bomber formation. Fatigue gnawed at his muscles, the bitter cold seeped into his bones, and fuel levels edged ever closer to critical, but Howard remained resolute, guided by the unyielding instinct to protect the men below. Each maneuver demanded total concentration. The P-51 Mustang, though agile, required careful handling at extreme speeds, especially when evading multiple attackers. Howard twisted, banked, and rolled through the grey expanse, timing every adjustment to exploit both enemy weaknesses and the performance characteristics of his aircraft. Every burst of fire, every evasive action, had to be calculated in split seconds. It was a relentless calculus where hesitation could mean death for himself or for the vulnerable bombers he shielded. This was not a skirmish, it was an aerial crucible, testing skill, endurance, and courage simultaneously. The enemy pilots pressed with tactical coordination. Messerschmitt Bf-109s and Focke-Wulf Fw-190s came from all directions, diving from above and swooping from behind, attempting to isolate Howard and force him into a fatal mistake. Yet he anticipated their patterns, predicting the likely points of interception, and adjusted his positioning to both threaten the attackers and protect the bombers. He drew on extensive knowledge of aerial combat, honed through prior missions, simulations, and innate tactical intuition. Every decision was a microcosm of strategic reasoning, a rapid chain of cause and effect under extreme pressure. Howard's guns, previously jammed, had been cleared, allowing him to re-engage the attackers directly. Even then, the intensity of the fight required the utmost precision. Ammunition was finite, and every round fired had to count. With unerring accuracy, he picked his targets, disrupting coordinated attacks and forcing enemy fighters into defensive maneuvers. In the span of minutes, he shot down additional aircraft, further illustrating the lethal combination of skill and courage that defined his actions. Each victory was not for personal glory but a means of survival for the bombers whose crews depended entirely on his intervention. Despite these successes, the limitations imposed by fuel scarcity remained critical. The Mustang's tanks were running perilously low, and Howard faced the constant calculation of risk, how to engage the enemy effectively while ensuring sufficient fuel for return flight. Each dive, climb, and maneuver had to consider both immediate tactical needs and longer-term operational survival. The tension between offensive engagement and survival was continuous, a balancing act that required not just skill but an extraordinary degree of psychological discipline. Throughout the battle, Howard maintained a calm demeanor that belied the intensity of the situation. Hours of continuous maneuvering, under the constant threat of death, might have overwhelmed any ordinary pilot. Yet he remained composed, deliberate, and focused, a testament to the rigorous training, personal resolve, and innate courage that defined his character. His ability to regulate fear and maintain situational clarity enabled him to respond effectively to multiple threats simultaneously, a feat that underscored his extraordinary capacity for leadership under duress. The bomber crews, though largely unable to see the full scope of Howard's maneuvers, were acutely aware of his protective presence. The Mustang became a moving shield, interposing itself between attackers and the vulnerable B-17s. Howard's positioning, timing, and aggressive engagement drew enemy fire away from the bombers, forcing opponents to react defensively. In effect, he became both sword and guardian, wielding lethal force strategically to maximize protection. The human dimension of this action, saving dozens of lives through deliberate choice and skillful execution, remains one of the most striking aspects of his heroism. As the engagement continued, Howard faced moments of near-impossible calculation. Enemy fighters attempted coordinated attacks from multiple altitudes, forcing him to simultaneously manage vertical positioning, speed, and angle of attack. He had to predict both the trajectory of his own aircraft and the maneuvers of each adversary. This high-speed, three-dimensional problem-solving, executed under extreme duress, illustrates not only physical prowess but extraordinary cognitive capacity, the ability to synthesize vast amounts of information in real time and translate it into effective action. During these maneuvers, Howard's understanding of aerial psychology became as important as his technical skill. He exploited the expectations and anticipatory reactions of enemy pilots, positioning himself in ways that provoked hesitation, miscalculation, or retreat. He understood how perception could dictate behavior, and he used this knowledge to protect the bombers and conserve his limited resources. The interplay between human psychology and aerial tactics was subtle yet decisive, highlighting the multifaceted nature of his extraordinary courage. Over an hour into the engagement, Howard's physical endurance was pushed to the limits. The strain of prolonged high-speed flight, repeated evasive maneuvers, and continuous cognitive engagement created immense fatigue. Yet he persisted, drawing upon reserves of strength, training, and moral determination. He understood that any lapse could result in catastrophe, the loss of bombers, crews, and the failure of a mission critical to the Allied war effort. His heroism was therefore defined not only by skill but by the capacity to sustain effort under extreme physiological and psychological pressure. Howard's actions were also marked by remarkable adaptability. As enemy tactics evolved, he adjusted in real time, incorporating new maneuvers, anticipating changes, and exploiting weaknesses. At one point, with fuel dangerously low and enemy aircraft closing in, he employed a series of diving passes that created the impression of multiple Mustang escorts. This clever use of deception and misdirection disrupted enemy coordination, providing critical protection for the bomber formation and illustrating the interplay of creativity, tactical insight, and courage. By the end of the engagement, Howard had flown for over 60 minutes in continuous combat conditions. He had successfully defended the bomber formation, inflicted losses on the enemy, and preserved his own aircraft and fuel sufficiently to return safely. The significance of this achievement cannot be overstated. One man, operating alone, had influenced the outcome of an entire mission, demonstrating a level of bravery and skill that is rarely matched in the annals of military history. His actions provided immediate tactical success and contributed to the broader strategic objectives of the Allied air campaign in Europe. The aftermath of the mission revealed the extraordinary impact of Howard's heroism. Bomber crews, many of whom owed their lives to his intervention, recounted the engagement with awe and gratitude. Their survival ensured the continued operational effectiveness of the strategic bombing campaign, which played a pivotal role in undermining German industrial capacity, weakening military production, and facilitating subsequent Allied advances across the European continent. In these tangible results, Howard's courage had a direct and measurable impact on the course of the war. Howard's actions earned him the Medal of Honor, the United States military's highest decoration for valor. The citation recognized not only the tactical success of the mission but also the sustained courage, leadership, and selflessness he displayed under extraordinary conditions. This recognition, while formal and official, only partially conveys the human magnitude of his achievement. The lives saved, the crews protected, and the strategic implications of his engagement speak to a heroism defined by intellect, skill, and moral commitment rather than merely acts of aggression or destruction. The P-51 Mustang, central to Howard's success, merits consideration not only as a technological achievement but also as an instrument that enabled his heroism. The aircraft's combination of speed, maneuverability, and firepower allowed him to engage multiple enemies effectively while shielding the bombers. Its design, while advanced, required exceptional piloting skill to exploit fully, particularly under prolonged combat conditions. Howard's mastery of the Mustang illustrates the critical interplay between human skill and technological capability in determining outcomes in warfare. Moreover, the mission nearest Chursleben highlights the evolving nature of air combat during World War II. Escort missions became increasingly vital as strategic bombing intensified, and pilots like Howard were required to operate at the intersection of precision flying, tactical reasoning, and human responsibility. His engagement demonstrates how individual excellence can shape mission outcomes, influence strategic objectives, and preserve life even amidst the destruction and chaos of total war. Howard's courage was not confined to the physical or technical realms, it was deeply moral. In choosing to engage enemy fighters despite low fuel, jammed guns, and overwhelming numbers, he accepted extraordinary personal risk to protect others. This ethical dimension, risking oneself for the sake of comrades and mission success, is central to understanding his heroism. It elevates the narrative beyond tactical achievement to a story of profound character and moral clarity. In reflecting on Howard's legacy, it becomes evident that his actions exemplify the integration of skill, courage, and ethical responsibility. He demonstrated that heroism is not only about offensive capability but also about protection, restraint, and the thoughtful application of force. His example serves as a model for understanding the broader human dimensions of warfare, where individual decisions, guided by courage and moral judgment, can have far-reaching consequences. The story of Howard's engagement also offers insight into the psychological demands of aerial combat. Sustained exposure to life-threatening situations requires resilience, composure, and rapid cognitive processing. Howard's ability to maintain focus, anticipate enemy behavior, and act decisively under extreme stress reflects a rare combination of mental fortitude and practical skill. These attributes, often overlooked in accounts of warfare that emphasize technology or tactics alone, are central to the narrative of extraordinary heroism. Beyond the immediate tactical and strategic consequences, Howard's actions contributed to shaping the ethos of the United States Army Air Forces. His bravery under fire, sustained attention to duty, and commitment to protecting others set a benchmark for operational conduct and professional excellence. Subsequent generations of pilots and military personnel have drawn inspiration from his example, understanding that courage, skill, and moral clarity are inseparable elements of effective service. Howard's legacy persists in historical analysis, public memory, and military training. Scholars studying the air war over Europe consistently highlight his engagement nearest Chursleben as an exemplary demonstration of individual impact within a complex operational environment. The principles illustrated by his actions, Anticipation, adaptability, courage under duress, and ethical responsibility remain central to discussions of leadership and operational effectiveness in both historical and contemporary contexts. As the years passed, the story of James H. Howard became more than a tale of wartime heroism. It became a lens through which to examine the broader human experience of combat. It illustrates how ordinary individuals, faced with extraordinary circumstances, can rise to meet challenges with skill, courage, and moral clarity. It demonstrates the profound influence one person can exert, not through brute force alone, but through the integration of intellect, training, and ethical decision-making. In considering the broader implications, it is clear that Howard's engagement embodies a timeless lesson. True heroism combines skill, courage, and concern for others, even in the face of overwhelming danger. His actions protected lives, contributed materially to the success of a critical mission, and shaped the course of strategic operations over Europe. The human dimension of his heroism, his willingness to place himself at risk for the welfare of others, resonates far beyond the technicalities of aerial combat, reminding us of the moral and ethical stakes embedded in warfare. The Medal of Honor awarded to Howard serves as a symbolic acknowledgement of these qualities, yet the full impact of his courage is reflected in the lives he saved, the mission he preserved, and the enduring example he set for those who would follow in his path. It is a story that bridges the technical, the tactical, and the profoundly human, illustrating the interconnection between skill, bravery, and moral responsibility in shaping outcomes during war. Looking back at January 11, 1944, over the skies of Ostjerusalem, one sees a tableau of extraordinary heroism. Lieutenant Colonel James H. Howard, piloting his P-51 Mustang, confronted overwhelming odds with skill, courage, and honor.